Hello, this is Pastor Rick, and I want to welcome you to the Sunday Forum for this Sunday of February the 13th. We are going to be talking about money this morning and your relationship to your money. Well, that's the informal title. The formal title is The Stewardship of Money and Wealth Within God's Economy. And we want to talk in this session. I'm going to give you 5 exercises to do, just questions that you can reflect on personally. And I'd love to hear some of the feedback that you can give me later on in the week after you've watched this video or when you come to the Sunday Forum on Sunday at 10:15. Now, this is certainly part of our stewardship campaign here at Emmanuel, but also part of our series on faith, vocation, and economics. And we want to talk about money. One of the reasons is that the Bible talks more about money than prayer. Now, when I say that, it's shocking to many, but it's true. The Bible spends a lot of time talking about money and wealth together, which is helpful because we often have a very complex, tense relationship with money. I always think about my grandfather. He was a businessman for National Cash Register. As a businessman, he often marked his success in his work with money, with the bottom line. So he had, on one side, a very positive relationship with money. But on the other, he was quite critical. And he'd often say that money is the root of all evil. Well, he was quoting there 1 Timothy 6:10, but he was misquoting 1 Timothy. 1 Timothy really talks about the love of money being the root of all evil. And my grandfather was saying it was just money, but that's what he believed. And he would say, for example, that money was ruining politics. And he also felt very strongly about money ruining the work environment, especially for my grandfather. He was against unions, feeling they weren't about the whole business or about the bottom line, just about their salary increases. And he would say the same thing about the church when he thought the church, was too focused on money. And so on the one hand, very positive understanding of money. On the other hand, somewhat negative. And so we want to talk about this. I've had 2 quotes here. One was from Peggy Noonan. This was a quote from years back when there were uprisings in China. But I love this quote, again, talking about the relationship with money. And she's with the Wall Street Journal, and she summed up the idolatrous danger of money in an interview with this Chinese student back in the day. Here's what she wrote. The other day, I met with a Chinese dissident who has served time in jail and whose husband is in jail in Beijing. I asked her if the longing for democratic principles that has swept the generation of Tiananmen Square has been accompanied by a rise in religious feeling, a new interest in Buddhism or Taoism or Christianity. She thought for a moment and looked at me and said this, among the young, I would say our religion is money, she said. And I nodded and said, oh, that's our religion too. So that's sort of on the negative side of money when it becomes the driver in our life, becomes like a mini god. Idolatrous is what the Bible would call it. On the other hand, I've got this quote from Rabbi Professor Jonathan Sachs. And often we see in the Jewish religion a very positive sense of money, that money is a blessing from God. So here is what the rabbi says. In Judaism, wealth is seen as both a blessing and as a responsibility. The wealthy are expected to share their blessings with others and to be personal role models of social and communal responsibility. Richesse oblige. To a considerable extent, that is what happened in most Jewish communities at most times, and it is what saved Jews from the decadence associated with affluence. Jewish teaching is best summarized in the famous aphorism of Hillel. And here's what Hillel said. If I am not for myself, who will be? But if I am only for myself, What am I? Judaism is personal responsibility allied with social responsibility. And I love the way then that is framed for us. And so as we approach now the stewardship of your money, your approach to money, I want to lead you into 5 exercises that you can just use at home as a helpful way of reflection. And the first is to use this acronym ARMS. And we want to talk about your relationship with money first. And here are 4 questions associated with ARMS, A-R-M-S. Okay? The first question is, how do I acquire money? That's the A. How do I acquire money? R. How do I regard money? How do I think about money? Now, M. How do I manage my money? And fourth, the S. How do I spend my money? So it's just 4 different angles to try to take different looks, different angles of vision of your relationship to money. Now, as you're working through those 4 ARMS question, once you get them finished, just write down a sentence, then try a second exercise. And to money now, we're going to use the same ARMS acronym, but we're going to add wealth to those questions. Because sometimes our relationship to our entire wealth, our savings, our stocks and bonds, our house, all of our possessions, is different than our relationship to money. And so ask again the same questions. A, how have I acquired not just my money, but my wealth? Okay, regard, the R. How do I value money? How do I think about money? But how do I value or think about my entire wealth? M, how do I manage my money? And do you manage your money and wealth differently? For many of us, someone in the house maybe manages the checkbook, but maybe not all our stocks and bonds and investments. That we might hire someone to manage those. That's what's meant here. And then spending. How do I spend my money? But also, how do I spend my wealth? Okay, that's the second exercise. And it's helpful to put here money and wealth together, which is often, again, what happens in the Bible. As I say, when you talk about money in the Bible, it's often about wealth. And there we say, again, the Bible speaks more about that topic than it does prayer. Okay, we've talked about now money, using this ARMS acronym, and wealth, the same thing. And then that leads us into the third exercise about stewardship. Because Christians have a very different attitude toward money and wealth than others in our secular society. In our society, they often reflect the approach to money and wealth advocated by the Romans, for example. In Rome, you owned your money and wealth. It was with you. You could do with it as you wanted, and that didn't just involve money, but also wealth, meaning your possessions, also including slaves. You could do with slaves as you wish because they were your possession. And therefore, a Roman citizen was even against taxation. They felt that was theft by the state. And so they really promoted not taxation of Roman citizens, but philanthropy. Okay. Christians have a very different attitude when we talk about stewardship, and we get it from our Jewish tradition, the Hebrew scriptures, where it talks about God owning everything. God owns our money, God owns our wealth, and we are merely stewards of God's gifts to us. And so that's important. In fact, the definition here of stewardship, which I like, is stewardship is the management or the administration of all God's gifts that you have, right? Including money and wealth. Within a particular community, and let's say here now the community is your family, and for a specific purpose. And so that's often how we manage our money, right? It's in the family, but what are we trying to accomplish? And we're trying to accomplish different things in our 20s and 30s, right, with our money and wealth, than when we're 70 or 80. And that's the whole idea of talking about the idea of purpose. What's the goals that we've set? The end goal, the telos of our use of money. Okay, first three exercises. Okay, what's your relationship with money? What's your relationship with wealth? And then the big stewardship question, which should help us, right? And I want to add, as you're thinking about the stewardship question, here are a couple additional things to look at. Is the accumulation of wealth good or bad for you? A blessing or a curse? Are there limits for the accumulation of wealth as a steward? How do you determine when wealth accumulation is sufficient, profitable, or even dangerous from a faith perspective? And we're just talking about you, not the neighbor, because everyone's different in how they would answer those questions. And then finally, which Bible texts or theological principles guide you as you try to determine how to steward your faith and money? Are there certain scriptures that have been helpful in guiding for you? We just write those down briefly, because it's always good to hang on to them. Finally, in which setting is it easier to talk about money, wealth, and stewardship? At home, with your friends, or at church? And I'll be really anxious to hear the answers to that. That all falls again into this third exercise of stewardship. The fourth will be fun. Okay, first you got to find your Luther's Small Catechism. Find Luther's Catechism, take it out. I hope you use it all the time. But if not, take it out. Yeah, blow the dust off the covers. Because what we want to do is have you look at the commandments, the Apostles' Creed, and the Lord's Prayer. And as you read through them, just briefly, ask yourself, how do they instruct you about how to use your money and wealth? How does Luther's Small Catechism, in effect, help you with your stewardship? And you might say, well, gee, I haven't really thought about that very much. But here's a hint. Every commandment speaks to money and wealth. The Apostles' Creed speaks to money and wealth. The Lord's Prayer talks about money and wealth, all within the realm of stewardship, within God's economy. And so we want to, again, use our own tradition. Use these stones, these foundational stones of the faith. Again, the Ten Commandments, the Creed, and the Lord's Prayer, to think through, again, our relationship with money and wealth. Within God's larger economy, what God's plan is for us and for the whole universe. And lastly, when we take a look at the Lutheran tradition, how we read Scripture, how we think the Word of God functions in our lives, it comes, we say, in two ways. There's really two words, law and gospel. Law and gospel. And this reflects in how we talk about God's economy, how God will help us to steward our money and wealth. On the one hand, we have a market economy. This is the economy we all know. And we do things, we pay for goods and services, we do work on a daily basis, and we receive remuneration for what we do. It's kind of a just system. And this is described by Martin Luther. He wanted a market economy, so to speak, that would function to serve the neighbor, not just for self-interest, according to more modern theories, but no, that we would indeed be paid for our services, but our services were genuine services, serving the neighbor, no matter if we were working in an office, in a factory, as a lawyer, as a doctor, or maybe we're staying home. All those areas of work are remunerated one way or the other. And that's the market. You want that to be just. You want the work to fit the pay, so to speak. But then the Bible talks about gospel, and this is a gift economy where we don't expect to be paid back. And we've all experienced this, right? You go out for drinks or you invite someone over to your home. You, in one way, didn't ask, well, I'll invite you over to my home if you invite me back to your home. That's not how it works. You do it freely, you invite someone to your home, and of course you hope that will somehow be reflected in the relationship. Gift economy, you just give freely, and that builds relationships. That's how relationships are built, even in our families. And this is helpful thinking about just your families when you have both a market and a gift economy. Sometimes we expect our children to do chores, right? We say, you're in this family, you've got to do your chores. You've got to, right, carry your responsibility, or you won't get your allowance, for example. That's the sense of market economy, right? We're expecting things of you for that allowance. At other times in the family, we just give freely. Often, for example, parents who pay for college or for education or for other things like healthcare. We give those freely. We don't expect our children to pay us back for those investments, those gifts into their future. And so this distinction in our catechism between law and gospel plays itself out also in the idea of a market economy and a gifted economy. And this is a harder exercise, but think how that influences you and your family. How you treat your children, your grandchildren, maybe your parents, your grandparents. In what sense is it a market economy? In what sense is it a gift economy? And so those are the 5 exercises I would give you to do. And again, I'd love to hear back. Again, talk about, first of all, your relationship with money. Use the acronym ARMS. Then add wealth. Then think through this whole idea of being a steward. Rather than owning all that I have, I'm a steward of God's gifts. 4th, take a look at the catechism. Just the first 3 sections, 10 Commandments, Lord's Prayer and Creed, Creed and Lord's Prayer. And then ask yourself, what do you learn about money and wealth from the catechism itself? And then think this harder exercise through, number 5, where we take a look at our lives, our relationships, particularly in our families. In what sense are they reflected by a market economy, and how are they reflected by a gift economy? You know, how we use money depends on faith, doesn't it? Money has no intrinsic value. It's the faith we put into the system that makes it valuable. And the same thing is true about being a steward and having faith in God, right? It's a different kind of faith. It's not like a market faith in our money, but it's placing our faith and trust in the goodness and promises of God. And so I hope that you'll find these 5 exercises helpful as you lean in to understanding your own role as stewards of God's money and of God's wealth in your lives. Thanks for joining us at the Sunday Forum. I hope that you'll join us also on Sunday at 10:15 if you're able. Bye-bye now.